You scoop a bit of product from the tin and it fights back. Dense, waxy, stubborn. But rub it between your palms and the whole thing changes. It softens, warms up, releases this faint woody sweetness. That little transformation, that's hair balm doing exactly what it's designed to do. My name's Julian Thorne, and today we're breaking down what hair balm actually is, how the chemistry works, and why it might be the styling product you didn't know you needed. You're listening to Luxury Beauty on a Budget podcast. Quick note before we dive in, everything you're about to hear is researched, fact-checked, and written by real people, but the voice delivering it is AI-generated. Just wanted to be upfront about that. If you've been listening for a while, thanks for being here. It genuinely matters. And if you're new, welcome aboard. We drop new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Today, we're talking about hair balm, what it is, how the wax chemistry actually works, and why it might be the styling product you didn't realize you needed. Let's jump in. So, let's start with the basics. Hair balm is a wax-based styling product. And when I say wax-based, I mean it. We're talking about formulations that are built on 30 to 45% natural waxes, beeswax, carnauba wax, candelilla wax, blended with botanical oils like jojoba, argan, or fractionated coconut oil. Sometimes you'll see butter extracts too, like shea or cocoa butter, added in for extra pliability. Unlike the gels or pomades you might be used to, balms contain very little water. We're talking less than 5%, and often none at all. That makes them occlusive, meaning they seal moisture into your hair while giving you light to medium hold. The word balm itself comes from the same root as balsam, which refers to those resinous plant extracts people have used for centuries for healing and protection. In the context of hair care, that translates to products that prioritize barrier function and conditioning over aggressive styling control. You can think of balms as sitting right in the middle. They're more structured than a leave-in conditioner, but softer and more nourishing than a traditional pomade. What really sets hair balm apart is that anhydrous or low-water formulation I mentioned. Because there's almost no water in the mix, you don't need synthetic preservatives like parabens or phenoxyethanol. That's a big win if you've got a sensitive scalp or if you're trying to follow eco-effective beauty principles. And the way these balms work on your hair is pretty elegant. They create a thin film around each strand, which cuts down on friction and frizz without locking everything into place. The wax esters in beeswax have these long carbon chains, C40 to C52, that form semi-crystalline structures. They don't fully harden, so your hair stays flexible all day. Compare that to aerosol sprays that leave a rigid polymer film or water-based gels that can flake when they dry. Balms give you what's called reactivatable hold. Hours after you've styled your hair, you can run damp hands through it and restyle without adding more product. Now, let's talk about the chemistry behind wax-based styling, because this is where it gets interesting. The performance of a hair balm really comes down to the wax-to-oil ratio and how those ingredients interact with the keratin structure of your hair. Human hair has a slight negative charge on the surface, which is why cationic conditioning agents stick so well. But balms typically skip the charged ingredients altogether. They rely on mechanical and physical properties instead. Beeswax is the cornerstone here. It contains around 284 identified compounds, mostly palmitate, palmoliate, and oleate esters of long-chain fatty alcohols. When you warm balm between your palms, you're disrupting the crystalline lattice of those wax esters, shifting them from solid to semi-solid. Pure beeswax melts at around 62 to 64 degrees Celsius, but when it's diluted with liquid oils in a formulation, that effective melting point drops to about 35 to 40 degrees Celsius, just above body temperature. That's why it feels solid in the tin but liquefies when you work it in your hands. Once you apply it, the wax cools back down to room temperature and re-solidifies, forming this micro-thin coating around each hair shaft. Studies using electron microscopy show that wax films on hair are only about 50 to 200 nanometers thick. That's thin enough to smooth down the cuticle layer without weighing down finer hair types. and it reduces the friction between individual hairs, which is what you experience as better manageability and less tangling. The oil phase plays multiple roles. Oils like jojoba, which is technically a liquid wax ester, argan or fractionated coconut oil have shorter chain lengths, usually C16 to C18. That allows them to penetrate slightly into the hair cuticle's intercellular cement, where they interact with the natural lipids already in your hair. So you're getting genuine conditioning, not just surface smoothing. Jojoba is especially popular because its fatty acid profile, which is about 70% eicosanoic acid, closely mimics human sebum. That makes it less likely to clog pores or cause congestion on your scalp if you're prone to acne. Carnauba wax shows up in premium formulations at around 5 to 15%. It's derived from Brazilian palm leaves and has the highest melting point of any common natural wax, 82 to 86 degrees Celsius. It adds superior gloss and a harder initial hold. But pure carnauba is brittle, so it's always blended with softer waxes and oils. The refractive index of carnauba is slightly higher than beeswax, which means more light reflection. That's where you get that healthy shine without the hair looking wet or greasy. For texture modification, some balms add kaolin clay or bentonite at concentrations of 2 to 8%. These are phyllosilicate minerals with massive surface areas, up to 800 square meters per gram for bentonite. They absorb excess sebum and add grip, which gives you a matte finish. The clay particles don't dissolve, they stay suspended in the wax-oil matrix. Formulators sometimes call these paste balm hybrids. If you want volume over sleekness, clay-modified balms are worth seeking out. One thing worth noting, balms don't contain synthetic polymers like PVP or acrylates copolymers, which you'd find in conventional gels. That means they won't flake, crack, or create that crunchy texture. Water-soluble polymers work by forming rigid networks as water evaporates. When humidity changes, that network destabilizes and you get visible flaking. Wax-based products don't rely on evaporation for hold, so they sidestep that problem entirely. There's also the scalp angle. Balms create micro-occlusion on the scalp surface if you apply them too close to the roots. For someone with a dry, flaky scalp, that can actually be beneficial. It prevents transepidermal water loss, similar to how barrier repair ingredients work in facial skincare. But if you're already producing excess sebum, heavy balm application near the scalp can make things worse. The fix is strategic application. Focus on mid-shaft to ends for styling, and treat the scalp separately with targeted actives like niacinamide for sebum regulation. So why does all this matter? Let me give you the practical performance advantages over conventional styling products. Balms represent a shift from aggressive styling control to nourishing manipulation. Conventional products, high-hold gels, alcohol-heavy sprays, achieve their effects through temporary protein cross-linking or extreme dehydration. The cosmetic effect is immediate, but it's metabolically stressful for the hair fiber. If you repeatedly use products with SD alcohol 40 or denatured alcohol listed in the first 5 ingredients, you can reduce your hair's moisture content by 15 to 20%. That increases brittleness and breakage over time. Balms work through mechanical film forming, not chemical alteration. That preserves the structural integrity of your hair's disulfide bonds and hydrogen bonding networks. This is especially relevant if your hair is chemically treated, bleached, permed, permanently straightened, because the cuticle layer is already compromised. The occlusive wax layer acts as a temporary prosthetic cuticle, reducing protein loss during washing. In cosmetic science, this is measured as the alkali swelling index. From a sustainability perspective, balms align more readily with eco-effective beauty principles than water-based styling products. The absence of water eliminates the need for synthetic preservatives, emulsifiers, and stabilizers that carry environmental persistence concerns. Beeswax, when ethically sourced, is a renewable byproduct of honey production. Carnauba harvesting doesn't damage the palm tree. Compare that to silicone-heavy serums, dimethicone, cyclopentasiloxane, that don't readily biodegrade and accumulate in aquatic sediments.
There's also the price per ounce value proposition.
A typical 2-ounce tin of artisan hair balm usually retails for around $12 to $18 and provides 60 to 80 applications for short to medium hair. That works out to about 15 to 30 cents per use. A comparable volume of high-end water-based pomade from a prestige grooming brand usually costs around $22 to $35, and it depletes faster because the lighter texture encourages over-application. The denser consistency of balm enforces conservative dosing. You simply can't over-apply without obvious greasiness, which functions as built-in portion control. For those tracking ingredients across their entire grooming routine, balms offer transparency and simplicity. An exemplary formulation might contain only 6 ingredients: beeswax, jojoba oil, shea butter, carnauba wax, essential oil blend, and vitamin E tocopherols as a natural antioxidant to prevent oil rancidity. This minimal ingredient philosophy reduces cumulative exposure to potential sensitizers, which is particularly relevant given the skinification trend that encourages treating the scalp with the same care as facial skin. Now, let's navigate the subcategories, because not all balms are built the same. Understanding the subtle gradations helps you match products to specific styling needs and hair characteristics. Traditional beeswax balms contain 40 to 50% beeswax and provide the firmest hold in the category, what stylists describe as medium hold with matte finish. These work best for short to medium-length hair, roughly 1 to 4 inches, and coarser textures. The higher wax load creates more pronounced definition for styles like textured crops, side parts, or modern pompadours. The trade-off is that they can feel stiff in very fine hair and require more emulsification time in your palms before application. Scandinavian and Baltic brands often excel in this category, leveraging regional beekeeping traditions. Manufacturing in countries with cold press extraction methods preserves more of beeswax's naturally occurring propolis and pollen content, which contribute antimicrobial properties beneficial for scalp health. Butter-enriched balms incorporate 15 to 25% shea or cocoa butter and reduce beeswax to 20 to 30%. The butter phase provides superior slip during application and creates a softer, more pliable hold. These are ideal for longer hair, 4 inches or more, where flexibility matters more than rigidity. Shea butter's triterpene alcohols, lupiol, and amarin have documented anti-inflammatory effects at the scalp, making these formulations appropriate for those with seborrheic dermatitis or psoriasis. The finish tends towards semi-matte with subtle sheen. Australian and Southern Hemisphere brands frequently employ this formulation approach, often adding native botanical oils like kakadu plum or macadamia. Clay-modified balms blend 5 to 12% kaolin or bentonite clay with reduced wax content, around 25 to 35%, for a matte, textured finish with volumizing properties. The clay particles absorb sebum throughout the day, making these particularly suited to oily scalp types. They provide light to medium hold with considerable reactivatability. You can restyle multiple times without adding more product. The texture is drier, almost chalky to touch, which some find less pleasant to work with, but it delivers unmatched volume for fine or thinning hair. North American craft brands dominate this subcategory, often incorporating volcanic ash or Dead Sea clay for mineral content marketing, though the functional difference between clay types is minimal at these concentrations. Oil-forward balm conditioners flip the conventional ratio, using 50 to 60% botanical oils with just enough wax, 15 to 20%, to maintain semi-solid form. These function as hybrid styling conditioning products with minimal hold. They're best for waves, curls, and textured styles, where definition and moisture are priorities over control. The high oil content can weigh down fine straight hair, but transforms coarse, porous hair types by filling gaps in the cuticle layer. Mediterranean and Middle Eastern formulations often follow this approach, emphasizing argan, olive, and sweet almond oils. The finish is naturally glossy, sometimes reading as slightly wet in thick application. Vegan alternatives replace beeswax with plant-derived waxes like candelilla, which comes from a Mexican shrub, rice bran wax, or berry waxes.
Candelilla is the hardest, with a melting point of 68 to 72 degrees Celsius, so it requires more oil to achieve workable consistency. That typically results in slightly softer hold than beeswax equivalents. Rice bran wax, extracted from the outer layer of rice grains, has an impressively similar fatty acid profile to beeswax and performs nearly identically. Japanese and Korean beauty brands leverage rice bran wax extensively, often pairing it with fermented extracts for added scalp benefits. Price points for well-formulated vegan balms are usually around $14 to $20 per 2 ounces, which refutes the vegan tax myth. Let me hit a few frequently asked questions before we wrap up the main content. What is hair balm used for? Hair balm is used for providing light to medium hold styling control while simultaneously conditioning and nourishing the hair shaft. It's particularly effective for taming frizz, defining texture, and adding subtle shine without the stiffness or flaking you'd get from water-based gels and synthetic polymers.
How is hair balm different from pomade? Hair balm contains higher concentrations of natural waxes and oils with minimal water content, resulting in a denser texture and matte to semi-matte finish. Traditional pomades are typically water-based or petroleum-based products with synthetic hold agents that provide higher shine and stronger hold but less conditioning benefit. Can hair balm cause scalp acne or buildup? Hair balm can potentially cause scalp congestion if applied heavily near the roots, particularly in individuals with seborrheic scalp types. The occlusive wax layer may trap sebum and dead skin cells. But strategic application from mid-shaft to ends and proper cleansing with sulfate surfactants typically prevents accumulation issues. What hair types work best with hair balm? Hair balm works best for coarse, dry, or wavy to curly hair textures between 1 and 6 inches in length, where the conditioning properties address inherent dryness and the flexible hold enhances natural texture. Fine hair types should opt for butter-enriched or oil-forward formulations to avoid heaviness. How do you properly apply hair balm? Proper hair balm application involves warming a pea-sized amount between palms for 10 to 15 seconds until fully liquefied, then working through towel-dried or dry hair from mid-shaft toward ends using finger combing motions. Avoid the scalp unless you're specifically addressing dryness, and add incrementally if you need more hold rather than overloading initially. To sum it all up, what hair balm offers is elegance through restraint. It's a formulation philosophy that achieves styling results through botanical architecture rather than synthetic force. The interplay of wax crystallization, oil penetration, and mechanical film forming creates hold that breathes and moves, that conditions while it controls. For those navigating the intersection of sustainable beauty practices and actual performance, balms deliver rare alignment. The chemistry isn't complicated, and that's precisely its sophistication. Long-chain wax esters coat and protect. Mid-chain oils nourish and soften. Optional clays add grip and volume. No preservatives, no fragrance allergens unless deliberately added, no microplastic polymers that persist in waterways long after they've washed from your hair. You'll notice the difference most in texture. The way balm-styled hair still feels like hair rather than a sculptured construct. Run your fingers through it at midday and find pliability, not crunch. The subtle cedar and balsam aromatics linger faintly if the formulator exercised restraint with essential oil dosing. This is styling that prioritizes the long game over immediate drama, recognizing that hair health and styling performance aren't opposing forces but complementary dimensions of the same practice. Thanks for listening to this episode of Luxury Beauty on a Budget podcast. We've got new episodes coming out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so there's always something fresh. If you got something out of this one, I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a 5-star rating and a quick review. It's honestly one of the best ways to help other people find the show. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe or follow so you get notified the second a new episode drops. Appreciate you listening. Talk soon.